Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experience. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology who will be bringing you their perspectives on how digital transformation is reshaping the way we recruit, engage, and graduate learners. You'll hear firsthand accounts of how institutional leaders are developing their strategy, as well as get deeper on the stories of how these EdTech tools are being built to foster better student outcomes. With that, let's get to today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 338, with Dr. Cristi Ford, Chief Learning Officer at D2L. Always great to have somebody like Cristi in her position at an organization like D2L. I have such a wide, broad perspective on the higher education space, education technology, and in this case, learning management systems, AI, how are things kind of intermingling? Again, kind of just continuing somewhat unintentionally, just a lot of episodes in this show about teaching and learning and AI's impacts on that. I do really think that's kind of the tip of the spear. There's just a lot of activity there. And I think that'll continue to permeate down into the other areas of the higher ed ecosystem. Really appreciate his willingness to come onto the show, talk about what they're working on there at D2L and how they're rethinking learning ecosystems for an AI-driven world. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode number 338 with Dr. Cristi Ford. It is always great when we get folks from some of the big EdTech players in our space, and certainly ones that are kind of part of those like foundational tech stacks, pieces of an SIS, all those things that really are crucial to get right and to leverage their full potential and everything. Our conversation will be talking a bit about the LMS space in particular, but going into a lot more than that as well. But I think that'll be where we start. But we'll kick things off as we always do. Cristi, if you want to briefly introduce yourself and your background, and then we'll get into more about just the work that D2L is doing right now, and then just more about kind of the context that it is doing that work in.
Absolutely. Dustin, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to join you today. It's really great to be with you. You have been doing this podcasting work for some time. I can call you a podcaster, an OG podcaster, given all the time that you put and commitment. So I'm Dr. Cristi Ford, Chief Learning Officer here at D2L. I have spent my life's work really being an educator. And sometimes I joke when I'm doing a keynote, I tell people being an educator sometimes transcends all other parts of my identity. So I have spent time in K-12. I've spent time in nonprofit. I've spent a lot of time in higher education in roles like Associate Vice Provost, Chief Academic Officer, Director of Online Education, and really have appreciated and enjoyed the ride of how digital learning has transformed higher education in the past 25 years. And so it's culminated in this experience now being the Chief Learning Officer here at D2L.
Yeah, and it's just a cool title, Chief Learning Officer, to achieve and everything. But before we get too far, just in case folks aren't aware of the full kind of scope and all that kind of happens there at D2L, if you want to just briefly explain a bit about the work of D2L, and I guess maybe, to sort of build off of you being the Chief Learning Officer, a unique role, what are things that you do day to day within that context of D2L's work?
Absolutely. So for those who don't know, D2L is the name of the organization. We spend a lot of time. We created a learning ecosystem, which historically has been called the LMS, the learning management system, that we call Brightspace. And so we spent a lot of time working with schools, colleges, universities, and even an employee training space, really trying to help them solve the fundamental problem around how are they going to transform the way that learning happens, that they are moving through and thinking about helping people learn more effectively, efficaciously, especially in this very challenging and rapidly evolving world. And so my work is really central to that mission, that I get a lot of opportunities to work with leaders thinking about the best practices around teaching and learning. What do we know about good learning science? What do we know about good pedagogical practices? And how do we use the tools and technology that we have available to really be able to elevate up and provide the best experience? And so my work really focuses around the intersection of AI, scholarship of teaching and learning. I do a lot of work around research. If there's a chance to chat about that, I'd love to share a little bit more about that. But we're spending a lot of time helping institutions really think through not just what digital learning has been, but what is the future of learning? What is the future of work? Especially with the intersection now of AI. And one of the areas that we spend a lot of time talking about, and I've done a lot of work around, is fluency around AI. So I'm in partnership with some colleagues now writing a book called The Dimensions of AI Literacies. And as we spend some more time here today, Dustin, I'd love to kind of share with you a little bit more about what I'm finding in the research and the work that we're doing in those spaces.
There is something, I think, with this work, you're mentioning in your prior answer, is that the terminology of LMS does feel limiting when you're describing this work. It really has evolved. But to put it pointedly, and with the LMS turning 30, what changes do you feel like are emblematic of like where we are now? And then the sort of AI era, how is that kind of changing the development of the LMS moving forward?
Yeah, as a conversation point that we're having a lot. I think about the time, so D2L was founded in 1999. Our founder, CEO and president is the same person who founded the organization back then. And one of the things I remember from in the early 90s, I had an opportunity to work with young folks who had high functioning autism back in the days. And the ways in which we used what was historically the LMS was really about place of record, place to hold content. And as we've seen the evolution of where this learning ecosystem is going, which is a terminology I like to look at, is that institutions are really looking now to be a part of an opportunity where the students can search, they can draft, they can practice. There is a whole learning ecosystem that is just not bounded by uploading a syllabus or taking a quiz or a test, right? And so I think in the advent of AI, it really pushes the boundaries around the ways in which we think about learning, the ways in which we think about cognition and metacognition. For a long time, I also believe that a lot of the technology opportunities that came along, video and other kinds of ed tech that were running through this last 30 years, they only strengthened the LMS. And I think now with AI, we have an opportunity to really think about there's a lot of learning that's happening. There's a lot of direct-to-consumerism that's happening. There is a lot of opportunity where students are harnessing this technology in leaps and bounds in ways that, quite frankly, many institutions aren't ready for, or are they challenging the ideologies of what does it mean? What's the value proposition of higher education? How are we thinking about the ways in which we inform learners today? What does the future of learning look like? And so there are a lot of ways in which I think that we're grappling with as an industry. How do we move this work forward? And an LMS and the ways in which historically we thought about an LMS is just really an outdated model today.
Yeah, and I appreciate, just something like the clarify just what you call all this and why, and then the idea of even AI, obviously, like it's not like it came out of nowhere. It's been like a kind of long developing, and just the consumer end of large language models and that kind of conversational aspect really is the thing that's just emblematic of the thing that's driving a lot of the fundamental changes now. But yeah, I think it's a point well made of like over the decades that there have just been continual kind of evolutions and changes and all that. But I think we did reach a certain peak of all that, and then AI is supercharging it in a lot of different ways of just being able to do what we did before, maybe more efficiently and a little bit more effectively, perhaps. Or just I've seen it just really be an opportunity to rethink the learning part of the LMS. So I think there's a bright horizon, and we're not teaching anything new necessarily. We're just doing it in different ways. Like it's just the modality and everything. But that the conversation now being, there's a lot of disruption is the word I think a lot of people use. The traditional models of learning. I feel like you'd have a very good vantage point to answer this question. Do you think that institutions are adapting fast enough right now to how students are already using the ChatGPTs of the world?
So last year we set out to actually ask this question of students. So we did a research study that was a mixed method approach where we interviewed students for hour-long interviews, and then we asked them a survey in terms of like, how are you using AI and what are you using it for? And as you can imagine, Dustin, what we are noticing fundamentally is the pace of change with AI. That even doing that research in May of last year and now coming back to that to refresh that research, we're getting new answers, new opportunities, because the way that technology is shifting is such a fast pace that in many institutions, they either are not keeping up entirely because students are at the forefront of really pushing the boundaries. And what was so interesting in that research was many students were telling us, hey, we want to navigate this in a ethical way, but we need our faculty members to be in the conversation with us. We need to be able to see that vulnerability from our faculty members. We need to be able to double down and understand where it's applicable and where it's not. We know that one of the students in the study said AI can be used as a knife, it can be used to cook a meal, or it can be used to harm. So they are grappling with these kind of ethical dilemmas and really trying to figure these things out. And I think that as I talk to institutional leaders across the globe, they're thinking about academic integrity and privacy and accessibility and faculty workload. There are so many things that are on the plates of many institutional leaders that the real tension AI then brings to the surface is part of that learning experience. And so whether it's officially acknowledged or not, these are the kinds of wicked challenges or wicked problems, as my colleague Philip Dawson coins it in his research paper, that we have to figure out around AI, because in some instances, it is only further illuminating some of the issues we already knew that were happening. So let's take assessment and evaluation. You and I know that for a long time, the way that we were taught, if you get a PhD and you are now teaching and you're teaching the way that you were taught, it's not quite assessing the right capability, skills, the mindsets, the kinds of competencies that you want students to be able to walk into the world of work with. We know that for a long time. But now in this midst of AI, like, we have to do something about it. So I could go on all day, but I do think that there is this tension, this push and pull to move from policing to really a posture of how am I going to figure out the right flavor AI for our campus? And I am always pushing the boundaries of helping leaders think about how might they do that a little differently.
Yeah, and that kind of perfectly sets up my next question. But reflecting on what you said, I bring it up a lot because I guess it just feels like, for me, a parallel that I felt fairly tangibly as a student myself was like a lot of kind of existential dread about Wikipedia or something. And it's, hey, it's out there, people are using it, and some places, some professors within a certain course or just institutions, I think, were more or less explicit. And I think most of the time it was either just they don't have a policy or they ban it. But it's out there, and I don't know if they're like blocking the sites on their like institutional networks or whatever. But I'm grateful, I guess, and maybe just as the eternal optimist, it feels like this moment is different, where perhaps it is because the pace of change is so quick, it's condensing the timeline of just being like, okay, we need to not just have it be the Wild West out there. The tools are out there. The students are going to be using them, at least just figuring out a more sort of general perspective, and then maybe give a little bit more autonomy per professor, per program, or whatever else. But yeah, just like that, building AI literacy and just these conversations seem more prevalent than maybe I was privy to before, because that was just like my experience as a student. And then immediately after starting to go to grad school and work professionally in the field, it was just like almost like a punchline. You just said it to say it, of just like, hey, don't use Wikipedia, guys. But now it's because, like kind of the rate of change and the power of these tools, I think it forces maybe just a different conversation here. But to segue from that, that idea of that institutions may just have temporary blanket policies or no policy or whatever, but like, how do you see what higher ed leaders need to do now to start treating AI as a long-term structural shift in education and workforce preparation and all that?
Yeah. It's a great question. And gosh, before you asked me that, I could have pontificated with you about
We'll just have to do a part 2 at some point if you want to convey,
So here's the thing that's so interesting to me. As an educator, I got into to become an educator in this field to really be a part of the change I wanted to see in the world, right? I am in this work and want to see students succeed and to thrive. But I think this technology came at such a fast pace that the original posture was to resist it. And I think that if you can really take a step back and think about the learners you're preparing, what we saw in the research, right? Go back to the student research. What we saw in the research is that historically marginalized students were less likely to use AI at all. The stakes were too high for them to even give it a try, because some faculty were saying they could use it and others said they couldn't. And so we had a lot of qualitative data around, I'm afraid to be accused of cheating, so I'm not going to use it at all. I was just talking with a good colleague and friend, Dr. Gloria Niles at the University of Hawaii System, who was talking to me about now, this literally was 2 days ago, now that students are going in and augmenting, taking the output from their LLM of choice and augmenting it and making the writing either more jarred, more having more errors. And so now what are we doing? Are we teaching students that the measure of success is not beautiful writing, because beautiful writing is now being equated with cheating or use of AI? And so there's a lot of conversations around this. And one of the things that my colleagues and I who are writing this book really focus on is that it's not about being AI literate, because you're not literate or illiterate. This work is evolving so quickly. We really appreciated building the foundation of Doug Belshaw's work around the 8 dimensions of digital literacy. We have gotten some research done through the UNESCO Foundation around the 8 dimensions of AI literacy. So, for instance, civic literacies. How do you think about using AI for good, right? Which is very different from critical AI literacies, which is very different from confident AI literacies. And so we built a self-paced course that's open and freely accessible to people, but I think it's really trying to extend the conversation to help educational leaders think about where at your campus do you want to double down and begin? Maybe it's not all 8, maybe it's the first 2, right? And really being able to have that conversation, because what we know is the future of work is changing just as rapidly as the future of learning. And if we're going to prepare our learners to be successful in jobs that we don't even know exist today, we have to shift. We have to start having more inclusive, promoting AI usage in the classroom. So that's what I would say to that.
Yeah, and it's just funny, again, this sort of word choice that just tends to stick. Just sometimes I don't know why it sticks, but it's not the best word, AI literacy or whatever, but it's just what seems to be sticking, because, yeah, it is so much more intertwined in so many different things that, yeah, that does feel like it doesn't honor all of that kind of complexity of the ways that AI is just reshaping the world. And yeah, and you would think that, like, hopefully with everything that we're saying, and I appreciate the fuller context, is the idea of, like, you wouldn't want to do too much on either side of, like, kind of workforce preparation and all those sort of needs and demands informing the content delivery, but then do so much and being like, oh, we're the most, like, AI, empowered institution, whatever. But you're not changing like what you're teaching to be really aligned with what people are looking for. So it's the idea of, yes, it's the most razzle-dazzle, amazing learning and management system with all the bells and whistles. But people will be like, oh, so what are the classes? What are the things I learn or whatever else? And it's like, that's not that's not in demand. That's not what I'm looking for or whatever. So I think, there's a harmonious balance, I guess, of evolutions of learning, evolutions of, I guess it's the sort of what are we teaching and how are we teaching it? But we're at a point now, where I think that is just in so many different ways of folks like yourself helping to provide frameworks to use with all this. But I think, like, everybody's starting to maybe dabble a little bit and have little experiences. So there's not even, like, the kind of the ambiguity side either. Like, it all just feels like it's starting to get a little bit more, just more tangible for people in general, but then starting to get more specifics about how to think strategically about all this. Yeah.
But to your point, I think that if we had this conversation a year ago or 18 months ago, this would be a very different conversation, right? And now we're at a point where people are like, okay, so the use of LLMs, it's here to stay. AI is a part of the fabric of how we think about the future of education. I will say, to your point around leaders, it's interesting to me when I talk to leaders who are saying, we're going to be AI first, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But then you look at the rate of change at institutions. Institutions historically are sometimes like turning a cruise ship, right? Like, it happens very deliberately, very slowly. And so if you're talking with leaders who have this great mandate in charge, but the capacity hasn't been built with faculty members and on the campus, that I was talking with a senior leadership team 6 months ago, where I asked the question about where they wanted to go. And they said, we're going to be AI first. I said, tell me how AI is being used on your campus. And when we talked further, it was like AI was still a dirty word, or to admit that you were using ChatGPT or Gemini. And so there's a misalignment in terms of the culture leaders espouse to want to create at the university and the practices that were happening. And so there is this push and pull and tension that I still see happening on campuses today.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because that really echoes some other things that we've heard on the podcast, just in different contexts, but it really is very applicable here. Understanding where you are and where you want to get to when it comes to digital transformation and whatever else, because I think, you can have those instances where somebody is espousing this very aspirational state, but it's, if you actually want to get there, that's all well and good, but we're still all the way back here. It's just going to take more time than you think, or more hands-on kind of training and support and guidance for people. And it's just the idea of acknowledging that. And if you want to get there, you're going to need to like put some sweat equity into actually manifest it versus it just being like, okay, this is what we're doing and good luck figuring out how to get there. And because I think, yeah, like the sort of senior level vision is important, but yeah, like the acknowledgement of like, where are we and like, how are we going to get there when it comes to doing things. And I guess it's just the other thing of often people want the one simple golden rule or whatever when it's this is what you got to do with AI, and it's just like easy, succinct, and whatever. It's like we can provide frameworks. It's like there's not really a right and wrong answer. I think you want to be able to just get into a level of nuance with all of this to contour around to your particular institutional context. We're almost through. We're almost there. The other big area that I want to just give honorable mention that I think is on the current existential dread when it comes to AI, like there was with like Wikipedia, is the idea of like students using AI are going to be outsourcing too much of their learning process, and it undermines the whole thing because it's okay, you're just using it to check the box, do the performance, and nothing is really sticking or whatever else. So what trend lines are you following right now, or maybe are most concerning to you regarding that sort of cognitive offloading, I think is the sort of fancy term to all this, outsourcing too much of their learning process, students to AI?
I echo that, Dustin. I think that is the heart of what we're trying to figure out. The biggest concern is that cognitive offloading, where students are relying on AI before engaging with even understanding the underlying problem itself, right? Like you think about the way learning happens is through practice and iteration and productive struggle. And so if before you even get clear about what you're being asked to do, you ram it into LLM, like you have lost the opportunity for that productive struggle. And this whole area around metacognition and how do we think about what we know about learning, how can we scaffold learning in ways to be thoughtful of some of this work has been really important. I think I mentioned before, but I'd love to shout out some work being done by Philip Dawson at Deakin University. He did a great job with some co-authors writing an article called The Wicked Problem of AI in Assessment. And what I love of the article is he talks about with this new era of AI, there are trade-offs. So when you're thinking about now evaluating or assessing your learners, there are ways that you absolutely have to do it differently. You have to be able to pull learners into the process, asking them to upload their output, asking them framing and scaffolding questions around what choices and decisions they made, right? Because if you don't, then what we're ending up is focusing on the output or the product as opposed to the process of learning. And so there's a lot of grappling happening. University of Hong Kong Science and Technology has done some really great work. By the man by the name of Sean McMinn has done some work around metacognition at his campus and what he's seeing in terms of that piece of the puzzle. And so I think that if institutions are really paying close attention to how AI affects critical thinking, problem solving, independent judgment, because those skills still remain essential. I don't know any LLM out here that has better empathy than I do. I don't know an LLM out here that has more courage in ways that I do. I think that there are still durable skills that are our responsibility to teach our learners, even in the era of AI. And so we have to do a better job. It's a hard job. We have to do a better job of scaffolding that learning environment very differently. And I think the last thing I will say to this is there is a reason why Minecraft is so successful in young people. And I think that if we as educators could understand how to do more co-creation of learning with our students and really help them to be able to grapple and have those productive struggle moments, man, we're going to be a lot better off, and that cognitive offloading will be offset. But it's going to require us, the humans, in the room for those shifts to happen.
Yeah, and it just feels like this challenge presents an opportunity, that idea of like breaking down the paradigms of just how we've built courses and facilitate learning and all that. Because, yeah, with some of the other conversations we had, like I mentioned before, that idea of AI can make simulative learning, role play, like that much more dynamic, that much kind of more effective and efficient than it has been in the past. Yeah, and just that idea of like the process of learning versus the product, I think is like such a good kind of clear and concise way to convey what the future state that everybody should be using as their North Star and thinking about how they can leverage AI in their unique institutional context to get there. Because it's just not going to be one single only way to use this. It could just be like for the types of programs we have or the type of students we serve or whatever else, it makes sense to use AI this way versus that way or whatever. But I think, yeah, the idea of the trend line or the concern or the thing to like point out is where either there's an outright ban or there's just like no policy. It's the idea of this is impacting things whether you like it or not. So you do just need to think more strategically, because if you're still focused on the educational product, likely that process of the student getting there to deliver that is being undermined in some way, because yes, of course, like they're going to go like the path of least resistance. Like they're going to try to like get the work done as quickly as possible or whatever else. So you hope that you could earnestly just make a nice speech to them about the respect for their own learning process and whatever. But I think it is that they would, if you set expectations early and often, then and like enforce those boundaries, expectations, those sort of things, then I think you can get to a really positive place where you're not overburdening faculty, staff, and like students are getting engaging, relevant learning experiences and all that. So I think it's on the horizon. It's a bright, brave new world. And again, everybody's chipping in from their own kind of points of view, doing the research, putting together the frameworks and testing things out and whatever. So it's really, really cool to see. But we wrap up as we always do.
Well, but let me just say this before you wrap this up, though. This isn't new, right? You think about defink, Kimbang, like deep learning versus surface learning. We've been dealing with this for decades, right? This is just a new threat. And I think to your point, we have to address it now. But we have long known that there historically were ways around learning that are better than others. And I think this is just our time to dig in.
Yeah, it is really, the folks have been doing that work. It's almost like, hey, man, you got your opportunity, man. Take a shot and step up to the plate here, whatever metaphor you might want. But yeah, because that's what I've heard people, speaking for a long time around like the mastery versus like performance learning or whatever. So yeah, that's how the idea of me looking at this challenge as an opportunity is, like we've known better for a while, but it's felt like just maybe too labor intensive for some not as well-resourced institutions maybe to go down those paths or whatever. But yeah, we're on the precipice, I think, of being able to really just integrate those things that, like there've been folks that really been doing a lot of thinking on for quite a while. But we will wrap up as we always do. Excited to kind of hear your response to this. Advice for other higher ed leaders navigating this moment.
In conversations that I'm having with presidents, provosts, senior leaders, I'm hearing a real desire to understand what it means at their institution to create their flavor of AI and the ways they're going to support students. But many are deep in that strategic question, but not always immersed in the tools themselves. And so I think that's a really hard place to be, to lead from. If you have a sense of what ChatGPT could do 6 or 9 months ago versus what Collab Coder can do today, like you have to be fluent. So my encouragement to leaders is this: keep immersing yourself. You don't need to become the technologist, but you do need enough fluency to make informed decisions about your campus. And those decisions are going to iterate and change at a faster clip than we have ever seen before. But without that fluency, it becomes really difficult to evaluate risk, to mitigate that risk, imagine possibilities and opportunities, as Dustin, you and I have been talking about, and ask the right questions or even guide your faculty and staff and students with confidence. And so I think leaders really have to move institutions from reaction to readiness, and finding all the ways to build around that, I think, is really critical. And the last thing I would say is that higher education leaders know this more so than we do, but higher education leaders need to keep people at the center of all of this, right? So faculty are not asking AI to replace teaching. Students are not simply looking for a shortcut, but both groups are trying to do some sense making around what does this mean in the learning environment. And I think our role is to create conditions where AI expands access. It strengthens the creativity, the opportunity, and brings better learning that sit at the heart of education, where we really need to go. So I will end with that.
Very good advice. And I do like that idea of moving from being reactive and really building the readiness, because I think there's a lot of resources out there. And I think just, hopefully folks being curious, asking your colleagues, the idea of just trying to know enough to be dangerous, to just make sure that you've got a shorthand for where things are, and like kind of test things out, play around with things. And that can really help inform discussions to be more current as hopefully you're working to build those policies and everything. I think now is the time, not years from now, to like get some things set in place so that you can start making those smart investments. Certainly, I think for a lot of our conversation into kind of like the training and preparation of folks, your faculty and staff and stuff, to then just realize all this like great potential that we've been talking about with things. So yeah, we'll have ways to connect with you and D2L and any other resources you might like to share in the episode description. And just really appreciate you and your team, all the great work that you are doing, and for taking some time out for the podcast here.
Thanks so much for having me, Dustin. It's been such a blast.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Geek podcast. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.